In recent months, the Middle East has witnessed extraordinary and monumental shifts that are altering the regional balance of power. These events were set into motion by the unprecedented Hamas attack on Israel, an event that triggered a cascade of consequences reverberating across the geopolitical landscape. At the center of these developments stands Iran, once a dominant player in the region, now finding itself in perhaps the weakest position it has faced in decades. To fully appreciate the scope of this shift, we need to delve into the historical and strategic context of Iran's regional influence, particularly through its axis of resistance strategy. For decades, Iran crafted a network of proxy forces and allied governments, leveraging sectarian, ideological, and military ties to expand its influence across the Middle East. Iran's strategic depth, the axis of resistance. At the core of Iran's strategy was the establishment of a network of proxies to project power indirectly. These proxies, which included Hezbollah in Lebanon, Shia militias in Iraq, and Houthi rebels in Yemen, operated as extensions of Iranian influence, often advancing Tehran's objectives without risking direct military confrontation. Lebanon and Hezbollah, founded with Iranian support in the 1980s, was not just a political party but an armed militia with a military capability rivaling many national armies. Its vast arsenal of rockets and its proximity to Israel's northern border made it a key deterrent and an invaluable tool for Tehran. Hezbollah's alignment with Iran extended beyond ideology; it was an operational extension of Iran's Quds force. Iraq. Following the 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq, Iran seized the opportunity to fill the power vacuum left by Saddam Hussein. Leveraging religious ties with Iraq's Shia majority, Tehran cultivated alliances with Shia political parties and militias, such as Kataib Hezbollah and Asarib al-Haq. This gave Iran significant sway over Iraq's domestic and foreign policy, enabling it to counterbalance U.S. influence. Syria and Bashar al-Assad. The Syrian civil war provided another avenue for Iranian expansion. When Bashar al-Assad's regime teetered on the brink of collapse in the early 2010s, Iran and Hezbollah intervened decisively, providing troops, training, and funding. Syria became a crucial link in the Shia Crescent, a contiguous belt of influence stretching from Tehran through Baghdad and Damascus to Beirut. Yemen and the Houthis. While less central to Iran's strategy, the Houthi rebels in Yemen served as a useful proxy to pressure Saudi Arabia, Iran's primary regional rival. By supporting the Houthis, Tehran turned Yemen into another front in its broader campaign to challenge Riyadh. Together, these elements of the axis of resistance gave Iran extraordinary leverage, allowing it to challenge both regional rivals like Saudi Arabia and global powers like the United States. But all of this began to unravel after Hamas's attack on October 7, 2023. The catalyst: Hamas's attack and its aftermath. The Hamas attack on Israel, unprecedented in its scale and brutality, set off a chain reaction that fundamentally altered the region's power dynamics. Israel's response was swift and uncompromising, launching a massive military campaign in Gaza that not only targeted Hamas but sent a message to Iran and its proxies. Lebanon and Hezbollah's collapse. When clashes erupted along Israel's northern border, many expected Hezbollah to play its traditional role as Iran's primary deterrent against Israel. However, Israel's response was far more aggressive than in previous confrontations. Israeli forces launched extensive airstrikes deep into Lebanon, targeting Hezbollah's infrastructure and leadership. The group suffered devastating losses, culminating in the killing of its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, in early 2024. Syria's fall. With Hezbollah weakened, Bashar al-Assad's regime in Syria lost its primary lifeline. Sunni Islamist rebels, backed by Turkey and emboldened by Hezbollah's retreat, launched a renewed offensive. Within months, they captured key cities, including Aleppo, Hama, and eventually Damascus. Assad fled to Moscow, marking the collapse of the Iranian-backed government and the end of Tehran's influence in Syria. Shifting alliances in Iraq. Iran's hold on Iraq has also weakened. The rise of nationalist movements in Iraq, coupled with growing resentment of Iranian interference, has reduced Tehran's influence. Iraqi militias once loyal to Iran have begun to splinter, with some aligning themselves with Turkey or Saudi Arabia in pursuit of alternative patrons. The regional fallout: Iran's isolation. The loss of Syria, the weakening of Hezbollah, and the fracturing of its influence in Iraq have left Iran isolated. Its once vaunted axis of resistance now lies in tatters, and Tehran's ability to project power has been drastically diminished. At the same time, Israel has emerged as a dominant regional power. Not only has it neutralized threats from Hezbollah and Hamas, but it has also expanded its military operations into Syria and Yemen, targeting Iranian-backed groups with impunity. Turkey, too, has capitalized on the shifting dynamics, strengthening its influence in northern Syria and positioning itself as a key player in the region. Saudi Arabia, long wary of Iran's ambitions, has seized the opportunity to bolster its own position. The kingdom has intensified its efforts to normalize relations with Israel, part of a broader strategy to counterbalance Iran. Iran's dilemma: to build or not to build? Faced with these setbacks, Iran now finds itself at a crossroads. Its options are limited, and its leaders are under immense pressure, both domestically and internationally. The most pressing question is whether Tehran will accelerate its nuclear program in a bid to develop a bomb. For years, Iran has insisted that its nuclear program is for peaceful purposes. However, many experts believe that Tehran has maintained the option to develop nuclear weapons if it feels sufficiently threatened. A nuclear-armed Iran would fundamentally alter the region's power dynamics, deterring direct military action against it and solidifying its regime's grip on power. But such a move would come at a tremendous cost. It could trigger a nuclear arms race in the Middle East, with countries like Saudi Arabia and Turkey pursuing their own nuclear capabilities. It could also provoke preemptive military strikes, particularly from Israel, which has a history of targeting nuclear facilities in hostile states. Conclusion: a turning point for the Middle East. Iran's current predicament represents a dramatic turning point for the Middle East. The unraveling of its axis of resistance has left Tehran weakened and vulnerable, while its rivals, Israel, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, have grown stronger. What happens next will depend largely on Iran's decisions. Will it attempt to rebuild its regional influence through new alliances and strategies? Or will it take the dangerous and provocative step of pursuing nuclear weapons? The stakes could not be higher. Iran's next move will not only shape its own future but could also determine the trajectory of the Middle East for decades to come. What are your thoughts on Iran's options and the potential consequences for the region? The collapse of Iran's axis of resistance, a turning point in the Middle East. The recent seismic shifts in the Middle East's geopolitical dynamics have altered the very foundation of Iran's regional strategy. At the core of this dramatic transformation is the collapse of Iran's carefully crafted axis of resistance, a network of allies and proxies designed to exert influence and counterbalance its adversaries. With Hezbollah in shambles, Syria's Assad regime toppled, and Iraq slipping from Tehran's grip, Iran now finds itself at a crossroads. What happens next could redefine not only the Middle East but global geopolitics as well. Unraveling the axis of resistance. For over 4 decades, Iran invested deeply in building a strategic alliance of proxies to project power, deter adversaries, and defend its ideological vision. This coalition allowed Iran to punch far above its weight, engaging in asymmetrical conflicts while avoiding direct confrontation. Hezbollah's decimation in Lebanon. Hezbollah's downfall marked the beginning of Iran's unraveling. Long considered Iran's crown jewel in its regional strategy, Hezbollah maintained immense military power and political dominance in Lebanon. But following Hamas's attack on Israel, Israel preemptively launched a comprehensive campaign against Hezbollah in southern Lebanon, dismantling its infrastructure and delivering devastating blows to its leadership. The assassination of its leader, Hassan Nasrallah, was not just symbolic, it shattered the group's operational command. The fall of Assad and the end of Syrian dependence. Syria, long a linchpin of Iran's influence, has now slipped from Tehran's grasp. With Assad's regime ousted and replaced by opposition forces supported by Turkey and the Gulf states, Iran's bridge to Lebanon and its Mediterranean ambitions have been severed. This loss not only isolates Hezbollah geographically but also cuts Iran off from critical smuggling routes for arms and supplies. Iraq's shift toward sovereignty. Iraq's trajectory is perhaps the most telling of Iran's diminishing power. Once a hotbed of Iranian-backed militias, Iraq is now charting a more nationalist course. The resurgence of Sunni Arab leadership, coupled with growing resentment of Iranian interference among Iraq's Shia population, has fractured Tehran's influence. Iraq's pivot toward Saudi Arabia and Turkey signals a rebalancing of power in the region, further isolating Iran. Iran's options, a time of critical decisions. With its regional strategy in tatters, Iran is now faced with existential questions about its role in the Middle East and beyond. The decisions it makes in the coming months will have far-reaching consequences. Option 1: Rebuilding through diplomacy. Iran could attempt to rebuild its alliances through diplomatic overtures and soft power. This would require a fundamental shift in strategy, focusing less on military proxies and more on economic and cultural ties. Iran could seek rapprochement with Gulf states like Saudi Arabia, leveraging shared economic interests to rebuild its influence. However, this approach faces significant obstacles. Decades of sectarian conflict and proxy wars have left deep scars, and trust in Iran's intentions is at an all-time low. Moreover, Iran's leadership, steeped in revolutionary ideology, may be unwilling to compromise its core principles for pragmatic gains. Option 2: Accelerating nuclear ambitions. Another possibility is that Iran doubles down on its nuclear program, seeking to develop a nuclear deterrent as a means of securing its regime and regaining leverage. A nuclear-armed Iran would dramatically alter the region's balance of power, deterring direct military action from its adversaries and forcing new negotiations on Tehran's terms. But this path is fraught with danger. It risks provoking a military response from Israel, which has made it clear that it will not tolerate a nuclear-armed Iran. Such a strike could escalate into a broader conflict, drawing in the United States and other global powers. Additionally, a nuclear Iran could trigger a regional arms race, with Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and even Egypt pursuing their own nuclear capabilities. Option 3: Doubling down on proxy warfare. Iran could attempt to reconstitute its network of proxies, albeit on a smaller scale. This would involve identifying new groups and regions where it can exert influence, perhaps focusing on areas like Afghanistan or Central Asia. However, rebuilding such a network would require significant resources, which Iran may no longer have, given its economic struggles and international sanctions. The role of the international community. The collapse of Iran's regional strategy has significant implications for global powers. United States. The United States, long a key player in the Middle East, has an opportunity to capitalize on Iran's weakened position. By bolstering alliances with Israel, Saudi Arabia, and other Gulf states, Washington can solidify a regional coalition aimed at containing Iran. However, the US must tread carefully to avoid overcommitting militarily or exacerbating regional tensions. Russia and China. Russia and China, both of whom have cultivated ties with Tehran, face a delicate balancing act. While they may view a weakened Iran as a less reliable partner, they are unlikely to abandon Tehran entirely. Instead, they may seek to exploit the situation to extract concessions or deepen their influence in the region. Europe. European powers, focused on stability and energy security, will likely play a mediating role. The European Union could use its economic leverage to encourage Iran toward diplomacy while working to prevent further escalation. Implications for the broader Middle East. The shifting dynamics in the Middle East present both opportunities and challenges for regional players. Israel, with its rivals in disarray, Israel has emerged as a dominant regional power. However, it must avoid overextending itself and provoking unnecessary conflicts. Saudi Arabia and Turkey, both nations are poised to fill the vacuum left by Iran's retreat. Saudi Arabia's normalization talks with Israel and Turkey's growing influence in Syria signal a new era of regional leadership. Gulf states, the smaller Gulf states, such as the UAE and Qatar, will likely play a balancing role, leveraging their economic power to shape the region's future. Conclusion: a region in flux. The collapse of Iran's axis of resistance marks a turning point for the Middle East. The region is undergoing a profound transformation, with old alliances crumbling and new power centers emerging. For Iran, the path forward is fraught with challenges, and its choices will have repercussions far beyond its borders. As the Middle East enters this new phase, one thing is clear: the decisions made in the coming months will shape the region's future for decades to come. Iran's position in the Middle East has been significantly weakened, and its next steps will have profound implications for the region's future. The question remains, will Tehran take the dangerous step of pursuing nuclear weapons? And how would the world respond? What do you think? Will Iran go down this path, and what might the consequences be? Share your thoughts in the comments.